Much for joining us on this snowy but very beautiful day in the city of St. John. So we'll call the meeting to order, and first item, please, Common Clerk.
Yes, Your Worship. Item 2.1 on your agenda is the minutes of the council meeting of January the 25th.
Okay, thank you. Moved by the deputy, seconded by Councillor Reardon. Thank you very much. On the question, call the question. All those in favor? Thank you. And anybody contrary minded? Thank you. Not hearing or seeing anybody. Next item.
Next item is 3 on your agenda, and it's approval of agenda with one addition, which would be item 17.1 from Committee of the Whole with respect to appointments to city agencies, boards, and commissions.
Okay, thank you. Moved by the deputy, seconded by Councillor Sullivan. Thank you. And on the question, all those in favor? Thank you. Anyone contrary minded? Not seeing or hearing anyone. The motion's carried. Thank you. Next item.
Next item is disclosures of conflict of interest, if any council members have a disclosure to make.
Yeah, I have a conflict on 5.6, and I'll just explain it to council. I'm a tenant, so I'm going to lean on the side of caution, so I will disclose that conflict on 5.6. So city common clerk, I guess I just we would just pull that item as not to mess up the rest of the consent agenda. Is that how we would do that?
That's correct, Your Worship. Consent requires unanimous consent when voting, so we would pull off 5.6 and it would become 14.1.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. Anyone else? Thank you. Not seeing or hearing anyone. Next item.
Next item is the consent agenda.
Okay, thank you. Deputy, do you want to just turn your mic on, Deputy? You usually...
Yes, I'll move the consent agenda 5.1 to 5.5 and then 5.7 to 5.10.
Perfect. Thank you, Deputy. Seconded by Councillor Sullivan. Thank you. Questions, Councillor Reardon. I always appreciate your clarification, Councillor. Over to you.
Thank you, Your Worship. I just want to mention on 5.5, the municipal street lighting retrofit project update for the public, that will save us $58,000 annually in cash. There's an energy saving too there. There's a CO2 saving, 143 tons. So I think that's impressive and something that shouldn't be missed in the kit. That refit will start February 1st to the 14th of March, and so it's not going to take too long to have it all wrapped up. I have a quick question on 5.10, the heritage, in regard to 5.10, which is, this isn't moving now.
The bylaw amendment for...
Yeah.
Yep.
I'm wondering if there's anyone there that can give us a little nutshell of what a heritage impact assessment is, because that will be going forward with the new bylaws that will cover the heritage area and for infill.
Sure. Ms. Poffenroth, please. You're muted. I saw you temporarily come up. Amy, there you are.
There you go. I'm having a few little button problems here. Thank you, through your worship, to Councillor Reardon. So the Heritage Impact Assessment is what is required for a Tier 3 infill application. And so, which is, as part of the infill requirements under the Heritage Bylaw, which was passed and updated early last year. It requires a peer review, so by another heritage architect hired by the city to do a peer review of an analysis of the design that's brought forward by the applicant. So with a Tier 2 infill, which is one step down, something that is less, say, contemporary, all that the city would require is a heritage impact statement submitted by the applicant. But with respect to a Tier 3 infill, we actually hire a peer reviewer to do a full heritage impact assessment. And it will be part of the package. It was part of the package that was submitted with the Heritage Board package last week, and will be part of the package to council at the evening of the public hearing on March 8th.
Thank you very much. It's exciting, really, because an uptown or a downtown, really any city, the architecture really should reflect every era and not just try to remake one era. So it's great, and I'm happy to see this this move into the future. Thanks so much.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Councillor. Did I see another hand? No. Okay, I had a question. Thanks, Council. I had a question for the Commissioner of Finance. Commissioner, we have these spring debentures come through our agendas. I sign them, of course, on behalf of council once the motions are passed. Can you just explain, I guess, for the public, what is that debenture tonight, and maybe just give us a bit of background on that?
Sure, through your worship. The debenture this evening before you is actually not new debt. It's old debt that is expiring that was contemplated to be refinanced. The good news is the old debt from 2011 that we've contemplated refinancing way back then was at somewhere between 3 and 4% of interest. And when we our last debenture, we were able to achieve somewhere in between 1 and 1.5% interest rates. So I think we're going to see some savings, again, not adding any new debt, but probably bringing our cost of debt down through a reduced interest rate.
Okay, perfect. Thanks. That's good clarity. Perhaps in our future, and maybe it was there and I missed it, perhaps in our future reports, we could say not new debt, refinanced. I could have missed it, but that's great news on interest rates. So, okay, thank you. I don't think I saw any other hands. I'll call the question then on the consent agenda. All those in favor? Thank you. Anyone contrary minded? Okay, not seeing or hearing anyone. Thank you. Next item, please.
The next item is members' comments.
Okay, thank you, Deputy Mayor. Kick us off, and then I see you, Councillor Sullivan. Deputy Mayor.
Oh, thank you, Your Worship. I just wanted to wish everyone happy Valentine's Day. It's coming this next weekend, so I hope everyone enjoys it, and if they can go out to dinner if they can safely. But I do want to mention something because I think it's quite something for our community. Hospice of Greater St. John for the last 35 years has had a Valentine's Day Gala, and that's one of their largest fundraisers, and this is the very first time that we haven't been able to have that gala due to COVID. So I hope people still remember us, and we'll be back next year. And so therefore I just want to say again that I hope people enjoy the weekend and be thankful for everything that we have. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Deputy. Councillor Sullivan, please.
Thank you, Your Worship. First, congratulations, St. John, at our health region for many days of zero new cases of COVID-19. I am ever hopeful that folks listen to Dr. Jennifer Russell's suggestion with regards to the Super Bowl last night, and that you stayed within your own 10, or even better, you stayed at home and enjoyed it with family and your own bucket of chicken wings. Though vaccines are slowing, it's nothing in the province. It's the folks who are delivering them are running into some issues, but people are getting vaccinated. But we've still got to stay on our toes, make sure you wear a mask, make sure you socially distance, wash your hands, look after each other. This pandemic will end, but we've got to make sure that we are constantly vigilant. Following up on that, last Friday was Wear Yellow for suicide awareness and mental health. And this really ties in, especially with where families are with COVID-19 right now. And just with that in mind, make sure you're reaching out to folks you know who may not have a big family bubble, who may be living on their own, or just may be experiencing increased anxiety. Many people are, because this has been a long year of pandemic. So make sure you're looking after yourself and your others' physical health by wearing a mask, but just as important, make sure we're looking after each other's mental health by reaching out and making sure people are feeling okay and making sure people are getting support when they need it. Thank you, Your Worship.
Okay, thank you. And Councillor Sullivan, I got to ask, Tom Brady, thumbs up or thumbs down? I know he left your beloved team.
He is going to retire as a New England Patriot. And, he and Gronk getting 2 more touchdowns last night. I feel so good about it. I may even turn off my background just so you can see Gronk hanging over my shoulder a little bit.
Excellent. Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Reardon.
I've got it on the phone, so I'll be able to follow along.
Thank you, Worship. In honor, since it's Black History Month, I want to read you a little blurb about Percy Julian. He was born on April 11th, 1899, till he died in April 19th of 75. He was an American research chemist and a pioneer in the chemical synthesis of medicinal drugs from plants, because plants, like people, also make hormones. He was the first to synthesize the natural product physostigmine, which I believe is still used in the treatment of glaucoma today, plus a pioneer in the industrial large-scale chemical synthesis of the human hormones progesterone and testosterone from plant sterols. His work laid the foundation for the steroid drug industry's production of cortisone and other corticosteroids and the birth control pill. The guy was brilliant. They had a really nice documentary on PBS. It's called The Forgotten Genius. If you can look it up, you should take a look. He had so many hurdles that he had to overcome during his career unnecessarily because of his color. He worked for Glidden for a while, and he left Glidden with 109 patents and had received $109 for those patents. So an impressive guy. Anyways, so I just, I think it's important for us to recognize our community and the Black community and the contribution that they've made to everything. And this guy was just an outstanding chemist. I just thought it was very interesting to bring forward. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Councillor. I didn't see any other hands. I had the same idea myself, Councillor, tonight. I just want to read to Council, but also to the community listening at home. As you know, it is Black History Month. I had the opportunity to attend a Prude Black History Society in New Brunswick unveiling of the Canada Post stamp on Friday, recognizing the community of Willow Grove. And I think at a subsequent council meeting, we'll do a better job of making sure that we recognize the family connections. I had some discussions with the Drummond family, for example, over the weekend. But what I wanted to do very quickly here, Council, if you'd allow, is it is Black History Month, as we know. I want to read very quickly a CBC story by Julia Wright, and it was very inspiring. I don't know if you caught the story. Steep streets, tall spires etched against the sky, gray wavers that know the way of wind and tide, dim, drifting fog, the seagulls' plaintive cry, a city old and assured, wearing the pride of epic memories and heritage. Few poems have so perfectly captured the grit and dignity of Canada's oldest incorporated city. These lines, titled St. John, New Brunswick, become even more remarkable when you learn the author was a Black woman born in 1887. Anna Minerva Henderson, the daughter of a school teacher and a barber, grew up to be an award-winning civil servant and a literary pioneer. Black literary critic and Governor General's award-winning author George Eliot Clark describes her as the first Black woman in English in Canada to dare to publish a chapbook of verse. The book, Citadel, is a love letter to St. John with poems about King Square, the Loyalist burial grounds, and Market Slip. She was a proud maritimer, as well as being a proud Black woman, said Clark. Anna Minerva Henderson rose above the racism she faced to carve out a position for herself as an educated, successful woman, but her name has been all but forgotten until now. Raised by a single mom. When Henderson was young, many Black New Brunswickers would have been illiterate, kept oppressed to serve as cheap labor for the larger white community, said Clark. While some Black people did receive an education, it often wasn't something that was talked about, says Jennifer Dow, a genealogist, a family historian based in Oromocto. Henderson's mother, Henrietta Leake was a school teacher from Kingsclear who graduated from the provincial normal school and taught in St. John's North End. Her father was an African-American soldier with the 31st Marine Infantry who fought in the Civil War for the Union forces before coming north. He found work as a barber, earning the nickname Professor amongst his clients. He passed away tragically in an accident in 1893, so her mother was left to raise 3 girls by herself, Dow said. Education was paramount in the Henderson home, Clark said, and his sister, Mabel, was known for exquisite needlework, which brought home prizes at the Canadian exhibitions. Their parents understood and realized that education was absolutely essential to allow their daughters to succeed and make their way in the world. Anna was the only person of color in St. John High School's graduating class of 1905. She earned her teacher's certificate, but was barred because of her race from teaching in either St. John or Halifax. After 2 years teaching in Black communities in Nova Scotia, she wrote the civil service examination. She passed with the 3rd highest mark for the entire Dominion of Canada in 1912. She went on to work in Ottawa for the Department of Mines and Forests as a senior clerk stenographer and was promoted to principal clerk in 1925. She also wrote a regular feature for the Ottawa Citizen called The Column. In 1945, she returned to St. John and worked as a stenographer for local law firm Fairweather and Stevenson. In 1965, at age 80, Henderson self-published her book Citadel. Many of the poems in the collection are about her hometown. St. John, New Brunswick opens with the city Latin motto, which translates as, "O fortune ones whose walls are now rising." She is celebrating the rise of the city of St. John, said Clark. In the old burial ground, Henderson describes the tall trees that spread out to protecting arms and old men on benches who talk the hours away. Along with the white loyalists, the Loyalist burial ground may have been a place where Henderson felt close to her roots, Clark said. Along with the white loyalist interned there may also be Black loyalists and Black slaves, although it's very likely that they would have been placed in unmarked plots or perhaps buried beside their former masters like pets, for crying out loud. Another poem, she would have been remembered as a girl in St. John, that the port was thriving. There were ships coming to St. John from all over the world and all over the British Empire. Almost done, Council. While the discussions of race isn't explicit in Henderson's poems, there are moments where she seems to reference her experience as a Black woman. One poem, The Life, reads in part, I who have walked alone with hate and fear and quelled them in my hour, with steadfast level gaze, now claim my own. Mine is the glory, I and mine the power. This message Henderson was trying to send, Clark said, is clear. She is saying, I am here, I am the pioneer, I am leading the way, even if she couldn't know for sure who is going to hear her. She was a Black writer who is marginalized on the margins of the country, but is still demanding to have an audience, to read and to be heard. Over her lifetime, Henderson never stopped writing. In 1974, at age 86, she enrolled in a creative writing course at the University of New Brunswick, telling the Telegraph Journal she did not care a pin about the age difference between herself and the other students. She planned a second edition of her book with new poems, but it doesn't appear that the work was ever published. Today, the Citadel is out of print, but is available via the New Brunswick Public Library. On July 21st, 87, at just a month shy of 100 years old, she was buried in Fernhill Cemetery alongside her sister and her parents. Despite Henderson's accomplishments, her legacy is non-existent as far as the general public is concerned, said St. John historian Peter Little. There's just a handful of people who know about her. Researchers like Jennifer Dow are hoping to change that. It's important for Black creators, artists, and writers working today in New Brunswick to see those who have come before them and those the excellence that has existed for centuries in New Brunswick, Dow said. I'll stop there, Council. It was a little longer than normally we permit ourselves, but I think during this Black History Month, I would urge you to go and read the last few lines. Thank you to Jennifer, to Julie, Wright, who so often writes such amazing stories about our history. And I think it is important that we celebrate our history, especially those that have contributed, as Councillor Reardon mentioned, from our Black community in the past. So Thank you very much. It's 6:26. Did I miss anybody who wanted to bring some quick remarks? I don't think so. Okay, so perhaps Common Clerk, I could read my proclamation and then we'll go into our public hearing.
Yes, so item 7.1 is a proclamation for Heritage Week. There's a bit of a typo on there. It should be February 15th to February 21st.
Okay, thank you. Okay, folks, thank you very much. The proclamation for Heritage Week 2021 reads as follows. Whereas the second week in February is provincially recognized as the time to celebrate our heritage, and whereas the third Monday is in February is Heritage Day in Canada, and whereas February 15th to the 21st is recognized by the National Trust for Canada as Heritage Week, and whereas our built heritage allows us to reflect upon where we have come from and to grow from our past. And whereas our city embarks upon new directions, welcoming new generations of St. Johners who allow us to embody this year's theme of exploring our past and reimagining our future. And now, therefore, I, Don Darling, Mayor of St. John, do hereby proclaim the week of February the 15th to 21st, 2021 as Heritage Week, and urge all citizens to support and participate in heritage activities throughout the city. And thank you to all those that continue to invest in and preserve and are passionate about our heritage, both within the city and around the city and around the nation. Okay, thank you very much. 6:28, Common Clerk. I know we have a public hearing starting at 6:30.
We could do a third reading, Your Worship. Item 10.2 should be relatively quick. 10.2 on your agenda is a vehicle for hire bylaw amendment, which requires third reading. So 2 motions, 1 reading in entirety and 1 by title. Okay, thank you. By entirety, Deputy Mayor has moved. Councillor Merrithew has seconded that. Thank you. I'll call that question. All those in favor? Thank you. And anybody contrary minded? Thank you. I didn't hear or see anyone. Common Clerk. A bylaw to amend a bylaw respecting the regulation and licensing of owners and operators of vehicle for hire in the City of St. John. Be it enacted by Common Council of the City of St. John as follows. The bylaw of the City of St. John entitled A Bylaw Respecting the Regulation and Licensing of Owners and Operators of Vehicles for Hire in the City of St. John, enacted on the 30th day of July 2018, is hereby amended as follows. 1. Subsection 10(1)(I) is repealed and replaced with the following. 10(1)(I). In the case of a taxi cab, the motor vehicle, by reference to the vehicle identification number and other identifying information, is at the time of licensing under this bylaw, in 2018, 8 years old or newer. In 2019, 7 years old or newer. In 2020, all subsequent years, 8 years old or newer. Item 2, subsection 12(1)(c) is repealed and replaced with the following. In the case of a taxi cab, ensure that the taxi cab is 8 years old or newer, having regard to paragraph 10(1)(I) hereof. Okay, thank you. And by title, please, Council. Deputy Mayor moved, seconded by Councillor Reardon. Thank you. And on the question, I'll call the question. All those in favor? Thank you. And anyone contrary minded? Thank you. Not seeing anyone. Motion's carried. A bylaw to amend a bylaw respecting the regulation and licensing of owners and operators of vehicles for hire in the City of St. John. Okay, perfect. Perfect timing, 6:30. We can go back to the public hearing, Common Clerk. Yes, Your Worship. So the city's advertised a public hearing tonight at 6:30. It's item 9.1 on your agenda, and it's for a proposed zoning bylaw amendment at 0 Eldersley Avenue. Okay, thank you. We'll have no presentation tonight, Council, but we will hear from our commissioner. And after that, I don't believe we have anyone that registered to speak in favor or in objection to this matter, but I will ask if there's anyone on the line just in case. Ms. Hamilton, you're going to give us an overview?
Good evening, Your Worship and members of council. Before you this evening for tonight's public hearing is an application to rezone a property at 0 Eldersley Avenue in East St. John, going from the environmental protection zone to the rural zone, and also imposing Section 59 conditions related to the development of the property. The application is being made by the city on behalf of the landowner for the purposes of correcting a mapping error in the city's zoning bylaw. The application has been reviewed by both staff and the city's planning advisory committee with reports before you this evening recommending approval of the application. As indicated in the Planning Advisory Committee report, there were no members of the public who spoke during the meeting, and it's my understanding as well that there are none registered to speak this evening. I believe we do have a representative from the landowner, though in attendance tonight. And finally, I just add that Ben Peterson is available on behalf of our community planning team if there are any questions at all from council on the application. Thank you, Your Worship.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Hamilton. So again, folks, just for again, those watching our council meeting during these times where we're meeting electronically, we make invitation for folks that would like to speak either in favor or raise any objection to the matter within the public hearing. And I think I just heard you say, Ms. Hamilton, that perhaps is there someone here wishing to speak in favor of the item tonight?
Your Worship, my understanding is the landowner is present, but not speaking tonight.
Okay, perfect. So I'll just call then, just one moment, sorry, Councillor Reardon, I'll just call to see if there's anyone wishing to speak, just in case somebody's on the line that we weren't aware of. Is there anyone wishing to speak on this matter, either for or with objection to the rezoning at Eldersley Avenue? Okay, not hearing anyone, we'll declare that that piece of the public hearing finished, and now we can go to questions if anyone has questions for staff. Councillor Reardon, was that over to you?
Yep, thank you, Your Worship. I just have a quick question. When I read through the kit, it says, and Jacqueline Hamilton mentioned this as well in her intro, that this will correct an error made during the creation of the current zoning bylaw. So I'm just going to ask, this is technical, but is there an opportunity for council to enable staff to correct their own mistakes without that coming to council? I mean, if they recognize it as a mistake and it happened, is there an opportunity for that in the future?
Your Worship, I can respond to the question from Councillor Reardon. There is no ability to deal with these types of requests, unfortunately, at administrative level, but staff do regular housekeeping amendments, and you will see some of those coming forward at various, on an annual basis to address any issues like this that come up. We did advance this one at the request of the property owner in this particular case.
Thank you.
Okay, perfect. So, okay, any other question? Thank you. I think Deputy, you're moving first reading. Yep, thank you. Deputy's moved first reading. Do I have a seconded by Councillor Reardon? Okay, thank you. On the question, I don't see any hands or any waving, so I'll call the question. All those in favor? Thank you. And anybody contrary-minded? Okay.
A law to amend the zoning bylaw of the City of St. John.
Okay, perfect. Second reading, Deputy Mayor's moved the second reading. Thank you. Seconded by Councillor Reardon again. Thanks. And on the question, I'll call the question. All those in favor? Thank you. And anybody contrary-minded? Okay, not seeing or hearing anybody. Thank you.
A law to amend the zoning bylaw of the City of St. John.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. Thank you to everyone involved, to staff, these public hearings, PAC. There's quite a bit of work that goes into those. So thank you very much for the work there. Perfect. Next item, please.
Yes, Your Worship. So next we have under presentations 8.1 on the agenda, We have representatives from the Police Commission and the Police Force to present the 2021 operating budget for the police force.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. Now is time, folks, to turn your cameras on. There's Mr. Keys. Thank you. Just a quick introduction. Mr. Keys
Yes.
is the chair of the Police Commission. Thank you very much for being here with us, Mr. Keys. And then you can
hear me?
yes.
Okay, great.
Okay,
I was going to introduce the other members of the commission that might be on the Zoom or Teams call.
Sure.
I don't know if they are, but in any event, they said they were going to try to join. But the vice chair of the commission is Doug Jones. He's the president and CEO of WorkSafe New Brunswick. Obviously, we have Councillor Sullivan with us as well. The secretary of the commission is Michael Costello, a lawyer with McGinnis Cooper. The representative from the province is Michael White. She's a finance person with the Hilton Corporation. Caitlin Dean is a new member of the Police Commission. She's the communications manager for CAA Atlantic. And Tamara Kelly is the executive director of the One Change Inc. So those are the members of the commission. Also with us from the force this evening are Chief Drolet and Deputy Chief Tony Hayes, and also Craig Levine with the city, who assists us with the finance end of things with the retirement of Marvin Korskad. That's under a shared services agreement that we have with the city, which we're hoping to move more towards in various positions as retirements allow. But the plan, ladies and your worship and members of council, somebody's got their phone going. In any event, the plan is to turn this over to Chief Drolet, who's going to ask Mr. Levine to take you through the slide presentation. Obviously, Mr. Levine does not represent the police department, but at the end of the presentation, the chief and I will answer any questions that anybody has. So I'll go on mute. I don't think it's me that's giving the feedback, but I'll go on mute and unless there's any questions right now.
Okay, no, it sounds good, Mr. Chairman. Thank you. Yeah, somebody is probably signed on twice, is what it sounds like. I'm not sure if that's you, Chief, or anyway. Just one second, because I see you are actually I don't know who's on the cell phone. Okay, and then Chief, you're signed on below as well. Anyway, let's give it a try. You can unmute, and we'll turn it over to you.
Can you hear me without background or without feedback?
Yeah, that's not
I do
too
have an
bad.
accent, so I have an accent, so it's nothing to do with the team.
Okay. That sounds good.
Okay, I'm gonna try to keep my camera on, but I don't have that great of a coverage, so sometimes I freeze if I keep the camera on, and but I'll try. So when I first landed my job, or when I first came here in St. John, one of the tasks I was asked to accomplish was a reduction in budget for, I think initially it was 1.175, and then it grew to 1.3. So working with the team, including Craig and Mr. Korskaden at the time, we look at different ways to do it. And one of the key driving principles for us was that we didn't want the service to the citizen to be affected. So we look at different ways, and I'll introduce Craig, and I'll ask Craig to present how we were able to meet the ask and to reduce our budget by 1.3 without affecting services at this time. So Mr. Levine, Craig, if you can take over from me. I'm going to try to go on mute.
I'm going to try to share my screen. Seem to be having an issue trying to get the PowerPoint open.
You could send it to Mr. Taylor, perhaps, or the city manager, or.
Craig, it's the city manager. Send it to me. I'll post it.
Thank you. And that should be coming right at you, City Manager.
Got it, stand by, it just needs to be scanned and then I'll put it up. I can't get it to come up either there, Mr. Chair, stand by.
You had it up, John. It was up.
Did I?
Yeah.
All right, one more time.
Okay, it's up, John.
Way you go, Craig.
Perfect. Thank you, John. Through you, Your Worship, and members of council, as the chairman had stated, I'm here to present a high-level overview of the St. John Police Force's 2021 operating budget. Next slide, John. So just some high-level background, as council approved the general fund operating budget on October 23rd. And of course, everyone is fully aware of the $10 million structural deficit we were facing in 2021. The St. John Board of Police Commissioners were directed by Common Council to reduce the operating budget by $1.3 million and explore opportunities for shared services. The Board of Police Commissioners approved the budget on December 9th, 2020. Next slide, John. So council approved a net operating budget for the police in the amount of just over $24.2 million. This reduction was 1.3, which represents about a 5% decrease over the 2020 operating budget. And here's just a high-level overview of our expenditures comparing to 2020 expenditures by division, as well as our revenues. And you can see the overall reduction in the net operating budget. Next slide. So the $1.3 million reduction, how did we get here? So we were able to secure an additional $300,000 per year for us in secondment revenue. And this was in partnership with Horizon Health for an integrated mobile crisis response team. And we have 2 full-time officers seconded to this unit. And the balance of the reduction in expenditures, the majority of it came from salaries and benefits. We had an elimination of a few civilian management positions, a sergeant position being converted into a civilian position, multiple retirements of senior staff, and as well as the chair alluded to, looking at some shared services opportunities with the city in HR and finance. Next slide. Again, here's just an overview of our salaries by expenditure, or expenditures by category. So as you can see, the salaries and benefits reduction, and then the balance of our other expenditures for an overall reduction of $1 million. So the 2021 operating budget, to break it out, the wages and benefits are about 85.5% of the overall budget. And that leaves us with a balance of about $3.6 million in goods and services. But some of the goods and services, a large portion of that is actually fixed with limited flexibility. And to highlight that, our building rent is about $930,000. Our detention services, $170,000. Computer support, evergreen maintenance, over $500,000. Fleet replacement, maintenance, fuel, just shy of $1 million. Our communications, $261,000. So what's left of that, which we would consider sort of discretionary, we still have to pay our legal fees. We have training, we have uniforms, office supplies, equipment replacement, safety supplies, and professional services. So a couple of the highlights that are built into the 2021 operating budget is the completion and implementation of the police force's strategic plan, completion of a 5-year operating and capital budget forecast, and this will ensure alignment with the city's 10-year financial plan and continued alignment with city financial policies such as the wage escalation policy. We're looking at hiring 6 new police cadets in 2021, with some cadets ready to start late February of this year. Continued focus on finding operational efficiencies, eliminating non-core police functions, and explore more opportunities for shared services with the city. I just want to highlight a few risks that are going to happen in 2021 and beyond. Again, the contract with the Police Association is currently expired. Contract with Local 486 is expiring at the end of 2021. The city's tax assessment growth was only 0.12% in 2021. The city just will not have the financial ability to increase costs above tax growth. And the impacts of COVID-19 will continue into 2021. And with that, Chief Turley would like to step in and talk about some of the highlights for 2020.
Thanks, Greg. So I was asked by the commission chair to offer some of the highlights that we had to do operationally over the year 2020. So as you know, the strategic planning process has been initiated. We completed an employee survey or engagement process in fall, and now we're doing the community engagement with assistance from the Chapman Group. We created a diversity and inclusion advisory committee. We had one meeting with some of the members, and we are having a meeting. We're trying to schedule a meeting for March to go over the term of reference with the committee members, and it's all going to be depending on the COVID. So now that we're going into a better area, we should be able to have that meeting soon. We have the launch of the mobile crisis response team, quite successful. 550 call for service as of December 31st. From mid-October to December 31st. So they're deployed every day, 11 to 11, 24 or 7 days a week. And we go out. It's a team of 1 police officer paired up with 1 registered nurse, and they attend calls for service or mental health crisis or mental health is at play. Quite successful so far. Good feedback from everybody involved. We have the sexual assault review process being implemented as well. And I'll turn it over to Deputy Chief Hayes just for that part of it. Sorry for the next 2 points, because that's his project.
All right, thanks, Chief. So as the Chief stated, we have initiated. Can everybody hear me?
It's quite a bit of echo there, Deputy Chief, but anyway, keep going.
Hang on. How's that?
That's much better. Thank you.
All right.
So as the chief stated, we started a sexual assault review process. Really, the reason why we did that is public trust. So this model has been identified as the best practice, evidence-based approach to achieve the best possible outcome for victims and survivors of sexual violence. So this model has been put in place across the country. We have Sunny Mariner, who's the executive director of the Ottawa Rape Crisis Center, and Jennifer Richard, who's the director of the Strategic Development Sexual Violence MB. So we're in the process of developing the model. We'll be creating a partnership with KV. They have the model already in place. And it's basically a group of advocates, individuals that have been supporters of those who have survived sexual violence. And it's a partnership between the police force and them to review files. There's approximately 30 files that would be reviewed, and they'd be reviewed on a quarterly basis. And from that review, we'll be getting a best practice on how those investigations from the eyes of the public are viewed, and they view every part of the file as the investigator proceeds, and have full access to the RMS. And from that, a fair assessment of better practices that can be achieved can occur. Thanks.
Okay, the next point is we're creating an evidence-based practice working group. So to look at, first of all, what are we doing? Why are we doing it? Can we do it better? Is it our job to do it? So there's a whole bunch of used to be called intelligence-based. So we want to make sure that we focus our effort in the best possible area and have the best outcome that we can, and to increase our return on investment, obviously. And that's what we're trying to do with that evidence-based group. So it's headed by, so we've got a senior manager of the force, we've got a working group, representative from the association, and we also have a scholar from the university. Dr. Marion Campbell is assisting us to make sure that, again, we go in the right direction. Next point, some of our operational efficiency and effectiveness that we have to implement for the past year. We created a senior leadership team, so every staff sergeant, inspector, and now we meet once a week. We have a policy direction, and we talk about budget. As Mr. Levine referred earlier, we never had a 5-year plan, a 5-year financial plan. So that's one of the first things I asked when I came here. Now we have to have that plan, and we're going to make sure that it's aligned with the city, so that we are supporting the city's financial posture, and to make sure that our plan is aligned with them. We also, as you know, business continuity plan created. COVID-19 and cyber attack, they're both that we had to work on. Not that we wanted to, but it's a challenge that came our way, and we had to create a plan from scratch, basically, and build it so that, again, our service to the community will not be affected. Creation of a formal policy manual. I come from an organization where everything is a policy, and when I got here, there was lots of policy that were either outdated and were hard to locate. So I tasked our management team, one representative, to come up with a formal policy manual, both operational and administrative, that we can go and our members can refer to, first of all, in a timely fashion, and then everybody knows where to look for, and it spells out what we want to do and what we want to accomplish as a police force for a certain different aspect of it. And on not on a daily basis, but we always review the call for service. Is it a core policing? How do we respond to it? Should we respond to it? So it's all that questioning that we have to do. Like and we're hoping that out of that exercise, we will come up with other project, if you will, initiative like the mental crisis response team, where we can pair up with other people, or we can simply walk away. This is not a policing matter, but we'll assist you, and there's going to be a gradual passing of the torch, if you will, so that the proper agency can respond to those calls for service. So we have to look at that, because we're responding to over 56,000 call for service throughout the year. That's a lot of call for service for the number of members we got. So we have to look at our ways, and are these calls should be all of us, or all police, or should it be something else? And then the last one, it's sorry, implementation of user fees for outside agency using a GPF facility. There's a few facilities that citizens of St. John paid for, build, maintain, and we had outside agency coming in and using them without any sort of user fee process. So this year, just before the cyber attack at the beginning of November, we implemented that. So I'm taking the range. There's a lot of police agency or a sheriff, for instance, or KV or other police agency who are using our range. Now there's a daily user fee, and same thing for our training room. We've got a good training room down in the Peel Plaza. And again, there was a lot of interest in people using it, but there was no cost recovery. So that's one thing that we're looking at, that's been implemented, and we're looking at other ways to increase revenue by, okay, is that something that we can go and recover some money because we're paying for the service, we're paying to supply the service, and people are using it. There should be a cost recovery. So that's what we're still going to be looking at in this year, see if we can increase our revenues that way.
Thank you, Chief. Your Worship, Council, if you have any questions.
Okay, thank you very much for the presentation. Council, questions, comments? Councillor McKenzie.
Thank you, Worship. Thank you, Chief, for the presentation. A couple of questions for you. Local 486 contracts coming due. You mentioned that. Is there two separate contracts for like people that work at City Hall and the people that work for the police department, or is there just like a separate clause in the main contract?
I believe you've got me on the details, Craig. Can you help us on that?
Yeah, sure. Through your worship to the councillor's question. Yes, they are the same contract. A couple minor maybe tweaks, but one signed with the St. John Board of Police Commissioners, one signed with the City of St. John. But for all intents and purposes, they are the same contract.
Okay, I didn't hear. I think you said they're in the same contract, different articles for that.
They are.
Same contract, yes, correct.
Okay. The other thing I wanted to ask you about was you said it's $170,000 for the detention center. Is that on the list to try to get revenue from other areas? Because our detention center is used for other forces in the areas, right?
Yes, it is. And we already have a cost recovery for those users, and mostly the sheriff and KV. We're in the process of renewing our agreement, and I'm doing a cost exercise to make sure that we want to charge the appropriate price, and that's what we're doing right now, the financial review, and it should be going to the board either this well, not tomorrow, because we're still waiting for a KV response to make sure that we are aligned, and then next week is next board meeting it will be with the KV. But they do. There's a cost recovery formula that we came up with, and that's the one that we're applying.
Okay, thank you very much. I know it was a tough go with the reductions for the whole city, not just the police department. But I want to thank you and the board for everything you've done and the way you've made those cuts.
Okay, perfect. Thank you, Councillor Hickey.
Thank you, Your Worship, and thanks certainly to Mr. Keys, Mr. Levine, the Chief, and the rest of the board, as well as members of the department as well for joining us this evening. Thanks for the presentation as well. I just have a few questions, I guess, bit higher scale here. Just wondering how is the conversation we've had as a community, whether it's around the presence of policing in communities, whatever it is, as a larger society, how you want to capture it. How has that had an impact on this budget, and has it? And how do we move forward as a police department from here?
Well, let me just try and answer your question, Councillor Hickey. So and this goes back to 2019. Typically, what the commission has done in the past is we would come in and see council with our draft budget. And when Chief Connell was with was chief, the city recognizing the fiscal challenges that it had, dictated what our budget was going to be for 2020. So that was a 5% reduction. So the chief was directed to meet that by the commission. Of course, we have, as you know, 85% of our budget is wages and benefits, goods and services makes up a chunk. We have, as the commission, I think it's fair to say every officer's basically deemed to be a community police officer. Of course, they respond to events that happen, but community policing has been part of the St. John police force fabric for a long time. Certainly when I was with the commission 20 years ago, we have a community policing unit. The officers are in contact with citizens every single day. So how did it impact our budget? Of course, we didn't want to change the core services that the police department offers. Of course, going forward, and we're involved in a whole bunch of things right now, including collective bargaining that's going on. So any ability to get public feedback, we look at that. Of course, the strategic planning process is an important one as well. I know there's been some criticism of the questions that have been drawn. The questions were drawn in consultation with experts in the field. There's commentary below each question. If a member of the public has a comment to make or a question, we're going to assess all those once we get them in and once the survey results are complete. And we'll look at what are the citizens of St. John, at least the ones that have taken the time, which we'll appreciate, to respond to the commission. What are the issues that are affecting them? So it's always a bit of a moving target, if I can say that. But look, the police force has a job to do. They're highly professional. There's significant challenges at times, and by and large, for the most part, and I just say this: a member of the previous commission 20 years ago stopped me in the pedway the other day and said, she had an interaction because of a drug situation and that affected her family member, and she said she couldn't speak highly enough about the police officer, and he wasn't a member of the mental health unit. It was just an officer that responded to the call and, basically acted as a social worker in getting help and everything else. So, it's a very dynamic job today. And look, for as much criticism as at times they get, they're in the public eye all the time. And they're the most heavily regulated, body of public servants, I think, with the criminal code, with the police act, and everything else that they have to, and the common law, and the courts that they have to respond to. It's a challenging job today, but they're doing it well, I believe.
Yeah, well, certainly. Thanks, and thanks for the answer. I've got a laundry list of questions here, but I'll try and keep it concise. I guess, building off what you said, how does the police force deal with those challenges in its? I'm not going to call it an image problem because I think maybe it's doesn't capture it all that well, but how does it deal with that community perception effectively, and how do we make sure that in conjunction with the strategic planning process, in conjunction with community consultations, how do we make sure that we are staying in check on, in an operating budget like this, making sure that we're challenging that status quo a little bit to continue that level of engagement?
Well, it's a good question, and I think that's something that the commission always is going to challenge management on. I mean, when Chief Drolet came in, back a year or so ago, one of the things that was affecting the commentary around policing in St. John were events that were happening in the United States. And rightly so. Questions are appropriate. One of the things we talked about was body-worn cameras, and the chief started that initiative. Quite frankly, it had been on the table years past. For budgetary reasons, it was not doable. But at the end of the day, if you want accountability, having a camera turned on every single time they get out of their car, you can't dispute that. Now, we didn't have the issues they were having in the United States, of course. But I mean, I think it's always a moving target and an issue that is front and center. So I can't give you a specific answer to your question, but it's something that's in the back of the mind of the commission all the time. And I know
absolutely no, and I recognize that it is top of mind too, and also recognize that our context isn't the same as a lot of folks that are, when we're talking about other scenarios. I know that,
Councillor, I'm just going to interrupt. I'm going to go to so you're way over time, but you've got to you can come back around if you'd like, and I'll just go to a couple of others and then I'll come back. Deputy Mayor, I think you had your hand up, and then I see you, Councillor Matthew.
Okay, thank you, Your Worship, and thank you to Mr. Keys as chair and the chief and the deputy chief. I was just wondering, I don't have a question that on the former council's questions, but on your numbers for staffing, how are we doing right now after the budget cut? You had some retired people, some in civilian jobs. What about the uniform personnel? Do we feel we have enough staff to do the policing in St. John? How are our numbers in comparing to other years, I guess?
I think the current collective agreement or the current complement of sworn officers is about 141. Of course, that's down significantly from 20 years ago. You know, at the end of the day, I'm sure the association would like to have their numbers higher, but you know, we certainly recognize the fiscal realities and challenges from the city. The police department is functioning well with those number of officers. There's always challenges. You hear every year the overtime issues and things of that nature. So we're trying to get a handle on that type of thing. At the end of the day, we're in negotiations right now, so there's all kinds of things that I really can't get into. It wouldn't be appropriate with the negotiating teams going back and forth. But you know, in the previous collective agreement, we had the ability to reduce if the fiscal realities were such. We're just going to have to play out where that ends up at the end of the day from a new collective agreement. And you know, it's too early to tell where we'll be with respect to that. But the job is getting done. And Chief, jump in if you need to. With the complement, but of officers, sworn officers that we have today.
I'm sorry, I was just going to say 141. Do we have any officers out on sick leave, long-term sick leave, or?
I believe there may be a couple, but there is a return to work committee that deals with that issue. I mean, it's down significantly from a few years ago. I can't remember numbers. I don't have those numbers in front of me, but I know that we do have officers on out on leave for disability or injury. I'm not sure what it is, but I know that there are a couple.
And we have if I can add, Mr. Chair, we have that committee that comprises of the association that was created this year, over the past year, and we have a process in place that they engage with the employees and to their doctor, and we try to put a plan in place to bring those officers back to the workforce, so that to facilitate the recovery and return to work. So that's what the committee is there for. And I just want to clarify the number with a 132 association and 8 or 9 management. So that includes management.
The 141 includes management?
Includes management, yeah.
Yes.
And it also includes any officer that might be out on sick leave?
That's correct. They're part of our establishment.
So your total number then is 141 for uniform personnel?
Including
yes.
management, yes.
Yes, including management.
And how many civilian besides the 141?
We got approximately, again, it's 25 to 26 in the public safety communication center, and roughly another 28 to assist operation.
Mm-hmm. Okay, thank you. And thank you for the presentation.
Okay, thank you very much, Deputy. Councillor Matthew.
Thank you, Your Worship. Chief, Deputy Chief, Mr. Keys, thanks for the presentation. Your numbers give me great concern. I'm looking at, $24.2 million, $21.4 million of wages. We know what the force received last contract, 3% give or take. The rest in fixed cost. You've got very, very rough numbers. You showed me $700,000 to play for. That's 1 year's increase of 3%. So I'm glad you're talking about a 5-year budget, or a long-term budget anyway. What I want to know is when you'll decide when this thing's on paper, a long-term budget, sir, and what risks do you perceive? I think we've got a lot of them here. the COVID to the city of St. John, we saw our revenues go up 0.12%, minuscule, and anyway, I just see massive risk in this budget. So I want you to comment on it, please.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Merrithew. And look, when the city gave us the wage escalation clause, the commission has completely bought into that. We know that from comments that have been made that that's likely what's going to be in place for next year. Some numbers similar to that. I think it was a property tax increase. Your Worship, you explained it better to us than I just did there 2 seconds ago. But we're fully cognizant of that. From the commission's point of view, the risks, as Mr. Levine on the slide presentation, the contract with the Police Association is a big risk. We don't know where that's going to end up, but they're fully aware of our position vis-a-vis the wage escalation clause. There's other issues, of course, on the table. So, for 2022, our budget, yes, there will be significant challenges. Will we expect that there will be retirements that will allow us to save a higher paid officer and bring in a lower junior officer? I fully expect there will be in discussions with the chief. So it remains to be seen, but yeah, there will be risks, and we'll have to address them.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Merrithew, you all set? Okay, thank you. Councillor Sullivan, please.
Thank you, Your Worship. Just quickly, as your representative on the commission, both the volunteers you have on the commission and the staff and senior staff that we work with, I think I've worked really hard and been very creative and smart around the adjustments that have been made in the current budget. I know it's already been mentioned, but to slow it down and highlight it, thanks to the last two chiefs, we have a mental health unit that not only is addressing an important issue in our community, but our chiefs were good enough that the province is paying for the police officers that are involved with it. If that's not a win-win for both service and budget, I don't know what is. And the other piece, certainly sitting on the finance committee with council, and I'm well aware of the risks that we have, and the risk that we have with the St. John Police Force would be very similar to the risk that we have with the city when we're in negotiations. But the St. John Police Force Commission has certainly adopted similar financial practices to the city. The wage escalation policy has been adopted formally. The fact that we're looking at putting a 5-year financial plan in place. I mean, those things are to do exactly what people are talking about, mitigate risks to the best of our ability, to make sure we're not in a year-to-year situation. And, our chair mentioned, some of the smarter things that our staff have come up with, as people retire, that difference in a person with 30 years experience versus a person with no years experience coming into the force. That's a big difference that helps us renew the force. There was an editorial in the paper talking about the age of the force. Well, certainly it helps us get younger, it helps us change culture, it helps us save some money in the process. So folks are thinking everywhere outside the box they can to make sure we're not only meeting the financial targets, but that we're improving service as best we can. Thanks.
Okay, thank you, Councillor. City Manager, I have a couple of remarks, but I do have a point of clarity. Can you, so we know we're certainly some financial storm clouds related to COVID, certainly. Do you have, I guess what's in my head is budget 2022. We know we had a flat budget this year. Sorry, we had a budget that we restructured and reduced by $10 million. What does budget 2022 look like? And I guess I'm thinking as it specifically to this discussion tonight with police.
Your Worship, members of council, I think there's obviously lots of different aspects at play anytime a budget of the size of 25 million gets put in place. But I think there's three drivers that I would like to highlight this evening for the police budget of next year, 2022. The first is, as part of our long-term sustainability plan, and we no longer have a deficit, we certainly don't want to go back into deficit. So one of the aspects we have within our long-term sustainability plan is that for 2022, there will be no increases to anyone's budget for cost of living adjustments for goods and services. So that means, regrettably, and including for the police force, if, for example, fuel was to go up dramatically, that increased cost would need to be offset somewhere else in the budget. We are not making any adjustments anywhere across the board for goods and services. That's one of the drivers for the police force budget of next year. The second one is shared services. The police this year did benefit from sharing some services with St. John. We will continue to work on that, improve that, increase the number of shared services, but only to a point can we do that without billing back to the police department for some of those services. And of course, that will be a discussion to be had, but I believe charging back for some of the shared services will be another driver next year for 2022. And the third one, of course, is wages. We have a wage escalation policy that the chair has identified that the police commission has also embraced. And basically the wage escalation policy says that wages and benefits combined shall not increase at more than the 3-year rolling average of our growth rate. That next year will be somewhere around 1%. Therefore, if wages through collective bargaining or whatever else are above 1%, then that difference will also have to be offset somewhere within the police force budget. So those are three of the main drivers that will drive the budget of the police force next year. Oh, and by extension, the same three apply to the remainder of the City of St. John employees moving forward and their budgets. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Councillor Sullivan, did you have your hand up again, or was it just the original hand? Okay, no problem. Thanks. Councillor Hickey, did you have a follow-up?
I did, just quickly, Your Worship. Thank you. And thanks again for taking the time here. Just quickly, I think the challenge we're consistently running into, certainly around this table, Mr. Chair, is really around just that level of knowledge and that level of that level of us feeling like we're a part of the conversation, but also being reported to a certain extent as well within that conversation. Because certainly, there's a lot of successes to list off in looking at the 2020 operational highlights, whether that's the Diversity and Inclusion Advisory Committee, the Evidence-Based Practice Working Group, the Sexual Assault Review Process, the Mobile Crisis Response Team. I know from folks in the neighborhood of a few other that has had a significant impact on them and has been positive. And certainly one of the biggest challenges that you guys are dealing with, I would think, it would be similar to say our fire department, which, is responding to circumstances that they necessarily shouldn't be responding to all the time. And that's as a cost of a lot of provincial cutbacks and a lot of impacts in whether it's social services and mental health services and things like that. I guess my question to you is, would you be, and perhaps you probably can't speak on behalf of the commission without a decision by the commission, but maybe the question would be better framed as, would you be willing to bring the commission some kind of recommendation to ensure that, alongside your biennial reports, alongside your reports to council, come presentations like this and come conversations like this, just so that we can be more involved. And I think
Absolutely.
that's really where a lot of the confusion gets broken down.
And that's a fair comment. And I know in the past, and I say the past, my past on the commission, we used to appear, I think twice a year at least. And whenever council asked to come before council, and we did. I mean, back in those days, we were looking for a new location for a police station or headquarters. We were in front of council quite regularly. I've got no issue doing that, and I don't believe anybody on the commission would. We try to operate it as a business in the sense that, the commission acts as kind of a board of directors. The chief's dealing with operational matters. We can't get into those. But from a point of view of keeping the entity that funds us up to date, which is council, absolutely. We've got no issues. I think I can speak for the commission right now to say that, if it's 2-3 times a year or more, we'll certainly come before council if required and answer questions that you have. Obviously, you have lots of things on your plate, but I just put that out there that it's not an issue.
Okay, well, I really appreciate that. I think that's where a lot of our breakdown is coming from. I think it would create a good, a much better bridge. It's just tough because, I have to turn to constituents and folks in the neighborhood and justify a lot of these expenditures, and I just don't have answers for them.
No,
and that's challenging. So I really appreciate that. I think it'll be a great step in the right direction. So thanks again for coming and presenting this evening.
Okay, thank you, Councillor. Okay, just a couple of comments for me. Thanks, Mr. Keys, Chief, Deputy Chief, and other board members. First of all, I think there's a lot of progress been made in a short period of time here, so really thank everybody for their continued work. Just a couple of reflections, I guess. We've had a lot of headwind, a lot of big issues to deal with as a council over the last 4 or 5 years. It just seemed like the only thing missing was locusts to come down and swarm us in some fashion. Floods, explosions, financial challenges, low growth. Certainly believe we're turning the corner. We've made a lot of tough decisions around restructuring, and I just wrote down here the dedication. You were talking about it, Mr. Keys. The force and the dedication of the force and just like the rest of the employees of the city has never been, in my mind, has never been in question. But we have to be able to have the difficult conversations. And certainly, I think this presentation was excellent tonight. I think really owning not only the successes, but being very open and transparent with the public about the challenges as well. And there are many conversations that certainly I have, you probably have, Mr. Chairman, you, Chief, have with members of the public. They want to see us addressing the challenges and the issues that we have. And, I think, I'm going to say it, even though people will be mad at me, I think we have a very expensive police force. We have on a per capita basis, we're at $346 per capita, and the Greater Moncton area is at $197 per capita. I think we have had a wage escalation that is completely unsustainable. I think we have expectations, in my opinion, that are completely unsustainable. So we've now wrapped around wage escalation. Sort of city manager just has articulated to you, Mr. Chairman, and to the chief and deputy, what budget 2022 looks like. So it's like, how do we put our energy together, to have a sustainable, more positive outcome? The core services versus non-core services. I'm very supportive of that discussion. And at the end of the day, I guess we're all here to serve the citizens of the city who make on average $32,000 a year, who'd be lucky to sustain any kind of wage increase if they've gotten one at all, who don't have a pension. So I just continue to be concerned about, as I know you are, about the about the sustainability of the force when 85% of your budget is wages, and how does the force continue to have an enhanced relationship, open, transparent relationship with the community, and innovate and reform, which doesn't have to be negative. I think can be very positive. And I think you've highlighted, Chief and Mr. Chairman, a lot of those ideas that you've got on the table tonight. And that ultimately, at the end of the day, the single biggest investment this community is already making is into protective services, $54,635,000. And I'm one member of council for another couple of months that doesn't believe that's sustainable. We're not going to grow and thrive investing the lion's share of our budget into police and fire. So somehow we all have to work together to figure out, and at the end of the day, council sets the budget. It will decide how it wants to invest its dollars to have a thriving and growing community in the future. So I've just heard a lot of things that I think in the last short period of time, Mr. Chairman and Chief, you've got your hands really wrapped around some really positive things. I think I'm hearing a really positive acknowledgement that the dollars are going to be the dollars, and the wage escalation policy matters. And I hope for the members themselves and for the police association, I hope you're listening, to the fact that you can't spend money you don't have. So I hope and I wish you a successful outcome in your in your conversations there. So really just I guess I just offer those up as just commentary from my perspective. City Manager, did you have your hand up again, or was that your original hand?
Yes, please, Your Worship. It's on the subject of communications between the Commission and Council. I think there's two important points that should be highlighted this evening that have not come out in the discussion so far. First of all, next month in March, we will be coming to this council with our recommendations on the creation of the Public Safety Committee and how that looks, how that feels for implementation immediately after the next municipal election. With the creation of a Public Safety Committee, not unlike our Finance Committee, not unlike our Growth Committee, all issues related with public safety will have a forum for better dialogue and communication between those who deliver the services and the elected council. So that is a positive step moving forward. The other aspect is on Work Plan 2021 that has already been briefed, and that is to re-examine the reporting requirements of all of our agency boards and commissions, formal reporting requirements into council. Every ABC will have a different requirement and a different pace and rhythm, but clearly those with bigger budgets will report more often. I have designated our Chief of Staff, who's also our CFO, Mr. Kevin Fudge, to lead that initiative and to do a complete review of the reporting requirements to improve that dialogue and that communication. And those recommendations will in due course come to council probably sometime in the early summer timeframe.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. So thank you very much, Mr. Chair.
I just would make one comment, Your Worship. Thank you to you and members of council for inviting us this evening. I also want to take this opportunity to thank Chief Drolet, who, as most of you know, only has a few weeks left on the job. We've already started the process to find his replacement, but I just would point out that the comment was made to me by an officer that the changes that the Chief Drolet brought in from his many years of experience with the National Police Force have been implemented by him here in the city of St. John, and we're the beneficiaries of that, quite frankly. So we plan to continue those with the new chief, and his senior management people are the beneficiaries of his ability to lead that he's shown over the last year here and a number of years with his previous employer. So to him, I wish him all the best in the future, and I want to thank him for his service to the citizens of St. John.
Yeah, perfect. Mr. Chairman, you took the words. I was about to say the same. Thank you to you and the board members tonight. Thank you, Deputy Chief. The reins will be in your hands for a period of time here, and Chief Drolet, we wish you all the best to you and your family into the future. Thank you. None of these leadership jobs are easy. We thank you for your contribution, your time while you were here, and we do sincerely wish you all the best on behalf of council and the citizens. Take care. Okay, thank you very much, folks. Okay, receive and file, please. Deputy Mayor, thank you, and Councillor Sullivan, thank you for that. On the question, all those in favor? Thank you. Good night, folks, and thank you, and anyone contrary-minded. Thanks. The motion's carried. Next item, Common Clerk.
Yes, Your Worship. 10.1 on your agenda is a parking meter and traffic bylaw ticket increase report. It does have an attached bylaw amendment looking for first and second reading.
Okay, thank you. We're going to go to Mr. Dion first, I think, to hear an overview. Mr. Dion.
Good evening, Your Worship and members of council. I'm just going to share my screen here momentarily. My apologies. Can everybody see that well?
Not yet, sir.
Oh.
We're having some sharing screen problems tonight, so.
Yeah, so it's, let me try again. It's up on my screen here. And is that working?
No, sir. Just maybe again, send it to City Manager and we'll try that route again.
Okay, one moment, please.
Thanks.
While we're waiting, Your Worship, I really wish you would not have put out there the notion of locusts.
Locusts, I know, I regretted it the moment I said it, sir. It's too cold for locusts here, City Manager. Okay, maybe you just send that. It's still not working. Yeah.
City Manager, I've I've sent that via email to you now.
Mark, check your outbox or send it a second time. Your Worship, if I could suggest in the interest of time, we can carry on with 12.1 while that thing gets transferred to me.
Sure, thank you, Common Clerk. Let's just move on and we'll come back to that item.
Yes, Your Worship, 12.1 is an update from the City Manager.
Okay, City Manager.
Your Worship, members of council, this is the standard, our standing agenda item where at each council meeting, I provide you updates on initiatives of note that are not part of other staff reports. This evening, I have no such items for you, so I will just take advantage of this time to re-emphasize the importance of COVID and the associated health protocols. Councillor Sullivan already identified the tremendous news that for the past many days, there have been no COVID cases in St. John region. But that does not mean we are out of the woods, and certainly the provincial authorities have kept us at the orange phase for some compelling reasons, including the risk of the variants. This evening, I would simply not wish to go through all of the requirements of COVID orange phase, but I would like to emphasize one where we have seen general compliance, but we could do better. And where we could do better as a community is on the wearing of masks outdoors. The mandatory order is quite clear. Unless you can assure 2 meters of social distancing, you must wear a mask outdoors. We still have many instances on our sidewalks and on our trails where individuals are not masked, and that is inappropriate and exposes all of us to an elevated risk. And therefore, for the city manager's update this evening, all I would remind people of is the importance of wearing those masks outdoors. And with that, Your Worship, I should be able to share the screen for Mr. Dion's update.
Can I just have a receive and file, please, Council, on that report? Thank you, Donna. Seconded by Councillor Merrithew. Thank you on the question. All those in favor? Thank you. Anybody contrary minded? Thank you. That item's carried. Okay, we'll go back to Mr. Dion's presentation. Okay. Great. We can now see that. Over to you, Mark.
Perfect. Thank you very much, and good evening, Your Worship and members of council. So tonight, what I want to talk to you about is one of our sustainability initiatives, and that is the increasing of parking meter and traffic bylaw ticket offenses. The end goal here today is just to try an approval rate. So it's to approve first and second reading of the traffic bylaw and the parking meter bylaw. Next slide, please. So hopefully none of you have ever seen this, but this is one of our parking ticket offenses. It's what we use every day to issue our parking tickets and traffic tickets. As you're aware, the city sustainability plan includes an initiative to generate additional revenue from parking and traffic ticket increases. I think it's important to note here that the Parking Commission manages everything from a parking perspective, but it's really broken down into two parts. We have off-street, which is managed strictly by the Parking Commission and its board. And then we have anything on-street, which at the end of the day, although managed by the Parking Commission, is the responsibility of Common Council if they want to make any changes to that. So next slide, please. I'm just going to share a little bit of information here with everyone. Parking tickets have not been increased since 2012. So that's 9 years. I'm just going to let that sink in for a minute. 9 years without an increase. The Parking Commission year over year issues somewhere in the vicinity of 20,000 tickets, and that generates approximately $600,000 annually. The increase that we're proposing tonight that be accepted is a $10 increase on the initial infraction. And if this gets approved, that could generate approximately $127,000 a year. Next slide, please. So one of the things we always like to see is good benchmarking. And I don't know if everyone can see this well. Certainly on my screen, it's small. However, we did some benchmarking against similar cities throughout the Maritimes. And as you can see, in every situation except for one, for a traffic bylaw ticket in Halifax, St. John is the lowest, has the lowest cost for an original ticket. Next slide, please. So here, I guess one thing that we wanted to talk about is we are looking to increase tickets, the initial value of the ticket, by $10 for both meter and any infraction related to traffic. But as those tickets age, we also want to increase it as they do today. So after 15 days, we're going to ask for it to go up $15 more. And after it gets older than 30 days, when we have to invest more time, more money, take it to court, we're asking for an additional $15 raise there. And as you can see on the screen here, if you happen to be looking at it, the only one that we didn't raise was the one for accessible parking or handicap spaces. And that's a limitation that we have in place from the Motor Vehicle Act, or else we would have increased that as well. With that, I'll wrap it up and ask if there's any questions.
Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Dion. Okay, so just procedural, yeah, okay, thank you. Councillor Reardon, kick us off.
Thank you, Your Worship. Mark, I just have a couple of quick questions for you. How many tickets, what percent of your tickets would you say are not paid and that end up going to a summons or whatever? Do you have any idea?
Yeah, so through your worship to Councillor Reardon, approximately 30% of our tickets end up going to court.
Okay, so you said we're going to increase by 15, and I know we've already sort of all set these numbers in stone, but it doesn't seem like that $15 is going to cover resources, because that gets fairly labor intensive as we go forward, does it not?
Yes, through you, Your Worship, to Councillor Eden. Absolutely, it does. We're looking at making multiple increases, actually. It's $10 for the first infraction, $15 after that, and then $15 after that. And to your point, it's a great point. It does get more labor intensive. As we take these things to court, more and more people get involved. We actually need legal involved at the end of the day. So there is quite a bit of increase there, but I think it would cover the additional expenses that we use to take these tickets to court.
Yeah, that last leap is what I was talking about. You know, to go to court is the expensive one. Now, what about, now you're mostly concentrating, I would assume, on the peninsula. If you weren't using leg power and you had something more efficient, we could probably cover more area, could we not?
Through you, Your Worship, to the councillor. Absolutely, there's technology out there today. Won't get into too much detail, but it's auto chalking. It's equipment that you can put on a vehicle. It's something that we've looked in past that it allows you to take a picture of the vehicle, get its license plate, do timings on it. So it is something that we'd definitely be interested in exploring down the road.
Sounds good. The only other thing, I guess, going forward, and this isn't a question for you, Mark, it's just a comment, is that when we do our bus lanes, not our lanes, but the bus lay-by, I guess, where the bus stops, it would be nice if the city would consider mixing the concrete with a bit of red powder, just to indicate. I find every day I walk down Germain, there are always cars parked on King Street in the bus in where the bus stops. So it can make it difficult. Delivery trucks park there, but I find with the red color, which had been painted historically on the pavement, it makes a little bit of a difference. People recognize it, so might be something for the future. Anyways, thank you, Mark.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor.
You know, as I said earlier today, this increase is something we have to more or less go forward. It's part of our sustainability issues that we discussed for a long time, and this is one way the city can obtain some extra money, even though it may be a burden for some people. So I don't see where we can do anything really but go ahead with this, because this is part of the budget that we've talked about for the last number of months. This is included in our monies that we're going to be collecting for 2021. So I'm prepared to move first reading on it.
Okay, thank you, Deputy. We'll just take the motion for now, I guess. Moved by the Deputy, seconded by Councillor Hickey. Thank you. I'll keep going through the questions. Thank you. Councillor Strobridge.
Thank you, Your Worship. Just a couple quick questions. The parking meters uptown that are on the street level, we can only pay up to a maximum of 2 hours on those at a time. Is that right?
Good evening, Your Worship. Through to Councillor Strobridge. It depends where you're parking. Most meters on the street are 2 hours, but we do have a handful of streets that are up to 10 hours where you can park. For example, on Water Street.
Okay. Well, anytime I'm uptown and I park, they're always 2 hours max. And I'm always wondering, why is it allowed? Why is it cut off at 2 hours? Why can't I pay for 3 hours?
Through Your Worship to Councillor Strobridge, the general thought behind that is what we're trying to do is create turnover in the uptown area, get more people into businesses, more people engaged. And if more people are able to park for a long period of time, we can have people in the businesses spending money. So that's what we're trying to do is create that turnover for the businesses.
Okay, and I understand the logic behind that, but I mean, sometimes the problem is uptown is I'm going to be uptown for 3 hours or 4 hours, and I'm out spending money, I'm out shopping, I'm out bar hopping or gallery hopping or whatever I might want to be doing. And the 2 hours is just not long enough. And money is money, whether it comes from me or it comes from a new car who takes my spot. And I mean, I just don't understand why we couldn't look at something like increasing it maybe by an hour, because sometimes one of the biggest complaints I get from people who end up getting tickets is it's like, well, I ran out of time. I had no intentions on trying to rip off St. John parking and not paying more than 2 hours. I just couldn't get back in time. And, you know, I'm like, hey, sorry, you know, I mean, I feel bad, but even myself sometimes I'm like, geez, I wish I could pay for 3 hours. It would just be easier. And I know that sometimes, a lot of times, the hotspot app is being pushed. And when that first came out, I was a big fan of that. I downloaded it and I used it many times until they started charging me a monthly fee, even when I wasn't using it. And I was like, no, I'm done with that. I'm not going to pay a fee for this app when I don't even use it. Again, it's just feedback. I mean, I would think, you know, maybe looking at increasing from 2 hours to 3 hours. Money is money, right? And maybe that's something to consider. And my other question was, do you have chronic unpaid parking tickets? Like, you know, dude's got 20 tickets piled up in his dash and he just doesn't care. Do you have any of those incidents at all?
Yeah, through you, Your Worship, to the councillor. I'll just make a couple comments, a bit of a solution. I'll leave it up to council if they did want to change the length of parking time on the street. But we do have a couple of beautiful facilities in Market Square and Peel Plaza Parking Garage where people can park for basically whatever time they do want to park there. With respect to your question about do we have people that have multiple tickets outstanding? Yeah, it definitely exists. We have one of our enforcement officers at the core that follows up and checks on these people and gets people to pay. But there's certainly a few in every bunch that don't want to pay their tickets, and those we end up taking to court, and there can be legal actions following those once they get to court.
Okay.
And we don't have the legal ability to put a boot on somebody's car and seize it?
No, we do not.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Councillor McKenzie.
Thank you, Worship. Mark, thanks for the report tonight. I guess one of the things that really astonishes me is you said that we haven't had an increase in parking in 9 years. And I'm wondering, how long has Fredericton, Moncton, and Halifax been so far ahead of us in their tickets, the price of their tickets?
Through your worship to Councillor McKenzie, I'm not sure. I can't answer that. I know in 2019, Fredericton had a survey done through Stantec, and they're about to change their ticket prices as well, as is Halifax. But as to longevity, since they made their changes, I can't comment on that. Not sure.
Well, so you're telling me that we're going to catch up to where they are today, but they're already on their way to a higher ticket now?
We're behind them today, and we're going to move a little bit ahead or be on par with them.
Well, I mean, if we pass this, we'll be where they are, or a little bit past them.
That's correct.
But then again, they're taking another step in the next little while to increase it once again.
Yes, but we should be on par with them at that point in time.
We should be. Okay. All right. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Hickey.
Thank you, Your Worship. Councillor McKenzie really asked my question. I just about being on par with those other cities. Thanks for your work, Mark. That's all for me.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. I don't think I had anyone else's hands. We've got first reading on the table, so I'm going to call the question. All those in favor? Thank you. Anyone contrary minded? Thank you. Not seeing or hearing anyone. Motion's carried.
Your Worship, this is a law to amend a bylaw respecting the traffic on streets in the City of St. John and amendments thereto.
Thank you. Second reading. Deputy Mayor, thank you. Seconded by Councillor Reardon. Thank you. On the question, I'll call the question. All those in favor? Thank you. Anybody contrary minded? Not seeing any. Thank you.
A law to amend a bylaw respecting the traffic on streets in the City of St. John and amendments thereto.
Perfect. Thank you. And throw your toonie in the machine and you won't get a ticket. So thank you very much, Mr. Dion. And if you've got one, pay it. Thank you. Okay, motion is carried. Thanks. Next item, please, Common Clerk.
Next item is a staff report under 12.2 on your agenda. It's sports field, arena floor, and tennis rates 2021.
Okay, Mr. Ouellette is going to introduce that. Hello, Phil.
Hello.
Over to you.
So through you, Your Worship, to members of council, it is customary to set rates for sports fields, arena floors, and tennis courts at this time of year, as it is the time that the recreation user groups begin their registrations for the coming year, which in turn requires clarity on the rates. As part of the sustainability package approved by council last year, the city now has recreation subsidization policies, which seeks to achieve a new cost recovery balance between the operational expenses borne on taxpayers and those on users. Staff facilitated a virtual meeting with these user groups on Thursday, February 4th to share these new rates and offer an opportunity to field questions from our community partners. I'd like to introduce to you Amy Mclennan, the Manager of Community Services, who will run through the recommendations before you this evening.
Good evening, Your Worship, members of council. I'm going to attempt to share my screen. Are you able to see it?
We are, yes. You have mastered something that, well done.
Well, I may have spoken too soon. One moment, please. Okay.
You're good.
Perfect, thank you. Tonight's presentation will provide an overview of the proposed rates for sports field, arena floors, and tennis bookings for 2021. And I would like to begin with a bit of background information. On December 16th, 2019, Council approved a set of recreation subsidization policies, which were also part of the overall sustainability plan. In January of 2020, City staff held a consultation session with user groups, and the new policies were discussed. There were groups who expressed concerns that the increasing fees would be unaffordable for their organization and membership. City staff heard those concerns and decided to recommend an incremental approach to implementation over a 3-year timeframe from 2020 to 2022. The intent was to provide more time for user groups to adjust to the rate increases. This approach was outlined in a report to Common Council on February 24th, 2020, and the rates for that year were approved accordingly, reflecting a 40% level of implementation. Tonight, City staff are recommending rates for 2021 that are in accordance with the approved recreation subsidization policies and in alignment with an incremental approach. The goal of the recreation subsidization policies is to achieve a new balance between individual user fees and taxpayer investment in the delivery of recreational services, while also reflecting appropriate cost recovery percentages for the various categories of users. The long-term objective is to offer reliable, consistent, and high-quality facilities to citizens and user groups. There is no denying that subsidizing recreation benefits the overall community. However, taxpayer affordability is also an important consideration. Essentially, the policies allow for the determination of rental rates based on a cost recovery model. The user fees divided by the overall operational cost provides a percentage of cost recovery, while the balance is subsidized by taxpayers. You will note that the first bullet in the slide is bolded. This is to highlight an important factor of the cost recovery model. During the development of the policies, City staff determined that only 50% of operational costs should be used as the base for calculating cost recovery for sports fields and arena floors. This decision to apply the cost recovery percentages to only half of the actual costs was made to ensure that the rates remained competitive in the market. The 2020 rates represented only a 40% level of implementation of the recreation subsidization policies. The recommended rates for 2021 were originally planned to reflect a level of 70% implementation, with 100% implementation planned for 2022. However, given the current challenges our community is facing due to COVID-19, there is a slight modification being recommended to what was previously outlined. Rather than a 70% level of implementation this year, City staff are recommending that that should be decreased to 60%, with a plan for 100% implementation in 2022. This table indicates what the cost recovery percentages would be for the various user groups in 2021 at a 60% level of implementation of the policies. The percentages for 2020 represent what the cost recovery was at 40% implementation, while 2022 indicates at 100% implementation. 100% implementation aligns with the cost recovery percentages that are identified in the policies. The next few slides indicate the proposed rates for 2021, while also listing what the rates were in 2020 for reference. This first group of rates is related to field bookings. The recommended hourly rates are based on an overall average of a 60% level of implementation for achieving cost recovery targets for the various categories of users. It should be noted that due to differences in facilities, the recommended rates for Class A fields and Shamrock artificial fields are above that average, while Class B fields are below that average. This next set of rates relates specifically to tournaments. You will note that the rates are the same for both adults and youth in each category of field. The reason for this is that it's recognized that tournaments contribute to the economy, and for that reason they are subsidized at the same level as youth. In order for a booking to be considered a tournament, a minimum of 20% of the participants need to come from outside the Greater St. John region. This final set of rates includes arena floor bookings and tennis. You will note that the tennis rates have been prorated based on the number of courts being booked. Understanding the challenge that any rate increase poses for user groups, there are steps that have been taken to assist in mitigating the financial impacts. As previously mentioned, only half of the operational costs are used in calculating cost recovery for sports fields and arena floor bookings. City staff are recommending only a 60% level of implementation for 2021, in lieu of the 70% that was originally planned. And it should be highlighted that the city continues to support the Pro Kids program, a valuable program that offers financial support to youth in need throughout Greater St. John. There are also steps that the user groups can do to pursue ways to mitigate financial impacts on their end. Increasing use of city facilities will spread costs over more utilized hours, resulting in lower per hour rates. They can also seek sponsorship to help offset costs, which many already do. Community management of facilities can be explored. Of course, safety, field allocation implications, and other details would need to be discussed, but city staff would be open to those discussions. User groups can also look at ways to increase participation in their programs or consider increasing their program registration fees in a similar incremental fashion as the city is taking with increases to the rates. The city will also continue to explore other ways to mitigate impacts. The annual operating costs associated with sports fields for 2021 is approximately $200,000 less than in 2020, and that's due to various continuous improvement and sustainability initiatives. These savings translate into lower rates for our end users. City staff are also in the process of investigating options for generating revenue through the rental of storage spaces and shared facility advertising. Given the ongoing pandemic, there are certain implications related to COVID-19 that should be noted. Of course, the city will continue to remain in full compliance with any provincial mandatory orders. Operations at city facilities will be in accordance with COVID-19 operational plans, and users of those facilities will also be required to develop and adhere to their own operational plans. Should the province announce that our region is once again in the red phase, cancellations for bookings in that timeframe will be accepted. And finally, it should be noted that any projected revenues have the potential to fluctuate should COVID-19 impact usage of our facilities. Included with the report is information regarding the annual updating of the outdoor facility allocation policy. These updates include the usual changes to the appropriate calendar dates for start and finish of seasons, as well as deadlines for the application process. There are also updates to the contact information for various inquiries. And finally, in lieu of a mass cancellation fee, a specific cancellation deadline has been added for summer field bookings. This is simply to allow more time for staff to accept replacement bookings to help recoup revenue. And this final slide indicates the two recommendations in tonight's report. That concludes my presentation, pending any questions you may have. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Amy, for your presentation. Questions, comments? Council, does somebody want to move the recommendation first so we have it on the floor? Thank you, Councillor Reardon. Second by Councillor Merrithew. Thank you. Questions or comments? Councillor Reardon, go ahead.
Thank you, Worship. Thank you, Amy. I think you're the only presenter tonight that had any luck getting your slides up on the screen for us right away. I just have a couple of quick questions. So how do we compare as a municipality to other municipalities? Is everybody going to 100% cost recovery, or are we an anomaly? I realize that, we have to do this for overall sustainability plan right now, but I'm just curious as to where we would sit on that scale.
Through you, Your Worship, to Councillor Reardon, I would say that we're a bit of a trailblazer in terms of the cost recovery model. From what we can see, other municipalities are still going with annual percentage increases, not using a similar model that we've adopted. And there are some other items that I guess differ. For instance, with the Fredericton, they're implementing recreation cards for non-resident user fees. So there are other differences between it that make it a little bit of an apple and oranges comparison.
Okay. Now, what about, I read in there too that a lot of the fields, rinks, whatever, tennis courts will have concessions, and it says that the city deals with specific providers. What's that, and how does that work?
Yes, as part of the outdoor facility allocation policy, there's some information in there, but essentially there are contracts in place for various canteen services, including in our city arenas. So that would be handled through our Parks and Recreation Department, and they would negotiate with anybody who's interested in operating concessions.
Does the city get a portion of the concessions? Or do you know?
I don't know that offhand.
Okay. This isn't something that I'm happy about doing. I guess if looking at cost recovery of things, I hate to look at it for activities, especially activities that benefit a community, benefit your population, and also, make you a community of choice. But I recognize it is what it is, and I hope that as we go forward and we get that growth that we're looking for, that we can look at some of these things. Because I think as a community, I would be surprised if the taxpayer would say, I don't want to subsidize activities. So I think that that's something that as we go forward, we'll be able to re-examine. I mean, I'm going to say this and everybody's going to go crazy, but I don't know if we look at the cost recovery of roads. But, we spend millions of dollars on those every year as well. So anyways, thank you for your presentation, Amy. Appreciate it.
Just Councillor, on your last comment, I guess I know it's a serious comment, and I think the short answer is yes, and that's why we are advocating to the provincial government to put regional cost sharing in place and to put tax fairness in place. So I would say absolutely, we are advocating for that change. Yeah, thank you, Councillor Strobridge. Over to you.
Thank you. When I read the report, and one of the things that struck me was that if Common Council chooses not to accept the recommendations, then there would be a projected $83,000 shortfall because of the deficits in 21 and 22. So if there was no deficit like we have, would these rates still need to go up the way they are?
Through your worship, to Councillor Strobridge. Yes, the rates are increasing based on the recreation subsidization policies that have been adopted by council. So those are in place and they're based on the cost recovery model. And just to clarify, they don't lead even at 100% implementation to a full cost recovery model. Even at 100% implementation, it's only 90% cost recovery for adults, 60% cost recovery for youth. And when we're talking about sports fields and arena floors, we're calculating that on only half of the operational costs, which was something that staff put in place to make sure that the rates still remained competitive in the marketplace.
Okay. And I go back to what Councillor Reardon had stated. I mean, myself as a taxpayer here in the city of St. John, like everyone else here, I may not be a councillor come May 10th. I'll just be Joe Public again. I don't mind some of my tax dollars going to fund sports fields and ice hockey rinks. I don't mind that at all. I have a big problem with subsidizing outside residents coming in to use the facilities that I pay for. And you alluded to Fredericton, who has the outside resident card. I don't know where we are with that at this point. I know it was pretty controversial with some of our neighbors. And I'm just wondering, I know you're saying, 90% cost recovery. So out of that recreational budget that our tax dollars get divided up into, I mean, how much of that is going for those sports fields? You know, I mean, they're there to be used, right? They're there to be used by the public who helps pay for them. I'm just trying to make that connection because I'm struggling understanding it. I'm pretty sure that the user groups are also, you know, might struggle to put the two together too.
Amy, I'm just going to ask the city manager, building on your point, Councillor Strobridge, I'm concerned we're throwing a lot of percentages around. This is a policy, as you did articulate very well, that council's already approved. Millions of dollars are still being invested in subsidizing people's activity, recreation. And city manager, I know you put your hand up a few minutes ago. Can you, I don't want to leave folks with the wrong understanding of what we are discussing and debating tonight. Can you just, I know you had your hand up, can you jump in for a moment?
Your worship, it is an important point to understand. All of our recreation facilities operate at a loss, without exception. Whether you're talking about an arena, a sports field, an arena floor during the summertime, a tennis pitch, they all operate at a loss. Therefore, we subsidize the use of these facilities by our various user groups. For example, if a youth team hops onto an arena floor or a hockey floor, an ice surface, they're only paying 60% of what it actually costs to run that facility for that 1 hour that they're on it. So the other 40% is subsidized. We are not walking away from the notion that we subsidize recreation, but we have put various levels of subsidization depending on whether you're a youth group, an adult group, a for-profit group, a not-for-profit, etc. That's the policy that council has approved. So even if we fast forward to the end of 2022, when we have applied our subsidization policies to 100%, to their entire extent, at that point, we will still be significantly subsidizing our recreation facilities because various groups, in fact, all groups, get subsidized except the for-profit adult groups. Even an adult playing a sport in this town at one of our facilities is subsidized 10% because they are a taxpayer and they should get a little bit of money from their taxes going towards their recreation. So every group, with the exception of for-profit, is subsidized, and that continues even with this policy. The $80,000 that Councillor Strobridge was referring to is the loss we're going to take this year that was unanticipated, not budgeted for, because instead of applying our policies to 70%, we're only going to apply it to 60% instead. That's an $80,000 delta that was not budgeted for this year that we will have to make up elsewhere. But at the end of the day, again, I stress, even in 2022, we will still be subsidizing our recreation facilities in a significant way.
Okay, that clarifies it. Absolutely. That puts the disconnect together that I was struggling, you know, big picture, putting it all together and then having to break it down a little bit. My last question, I have one more question. Do you want me to come back, Your Worship? Am I over time?
I don't see any other hands, so why don't you wrap us up, Ray? Go ahead.
Okay. Is this going to possibly, you know, make us so expensive that we're going to become uncompetitive? You know, is it going to possibly hurt sports tourism? Like it's just another, you know, oh my God, it's so expensive to live in the city. And this is going to be another example of things are so expensive to live in the city.
Amy, you want to go first or you want me to take it?
Well, I can speak to that. I mean, it is something that we'll continue to monitor going forward. The adjustment of doing only 50% of our operational costs as far as calculating sports fields and arena floors was, of course, with that concern that we wanted to remain competitive in the marketplace. It'll be interesting to see if other municipalities follow suit with what we've laid in place in terms of policies. And we'll go from there, but we know where we need to be in order to remain sustainable in our operations.
So just to pile on, short answer, no, I don't believe we will become uncompetitive Do we have the lowest rates in all of Atlantic Canada? Absolutely not. But we have rates that still would entice people to come to the city of St. John and use our facilities. One point I did not mention, Councillor Stourbridge, you asked about non-resident user fees. That is still an initiative that is on the books, but this council agreed some months ago, quite a few months ago now, that we would hold that in abeyance until we saw whether there was any progress made on regional cost sharing and regional approaches to the use of some of these facilities. So the jury is still out on that. Those discussions on regional cost sharing still need to occur under municipal reform. And I would suggest to you that if they are not successful in addressing the regional cost sharing challenges, then it is a possibility that the staff will be returning to the council of the day and asking them to consider non-resident user fees.
Okay, thank you very much for the explanation.
Perfect. Thank you. Thank you very much, everyone. Excellent presentation, Amy. You did an excellent job of answering those questions. Thank you, councillors, and in particular, Councillor Stourbridge. I think your line of questioning allowed for a little bit of clarity that there's still a significant investment being made by all taxpayers to support active activity and recreation. And then lastly, I just wanted to say, council, that this is exactly the type of conversation that your strategic planning advisory group is trying to try to have these discussions about where do we invest our dollars and our cents. And with due respect, I say what I'm about to say. It always strikes me that we'll spend more time talking about a $80,000 item than a $54 million protective services budget, for example. So the big dollars count and the little dollars count, and your strategic planning committee is waiting on some expert research to try to help us better position the city as we move forward for even accelerated growth. So thank you. The recommendation is on the floor, I think. I think it is. Common Clerk?
I show a mover and a seconder.
Okay, perfect.
Reardon and Merrithew.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. I'll call the question then. All those in favor? Thank you. And anybody contrary-minded? Okay, thank you. And that's just really an implementation of our own policy that we set, I think, last year. So thanks again, Amy, for the presentation. Motion's carried. Next item.
Your Worship, could I ask that we revisit item 10.1? We had done a first and second reading of the traffic bylaw, but there's a second bylaw, parking, that requires first and second reading that we skipped over. I apologize. Okay, thank you. Yeah, so we need a first reading for the parking bylaw amendments, please. Thank you, Councillor Reardon, seconded by Councillor Hickey. Thank you. On the question, I'll call the question. All those in favor? Thank you. Anybody contrary-minded? Not seeing or hearing anyone. The motion's carried. A bylaw to amend a bylaw respecting the regulation of parking in the city of St. John and amendments thereto. Thank you. And second reading. Moved by the Deputy Mayor, seconded by Councillor Reardon. Thank you. On the question, call the question, please. All those in favor? Thank you. And anybody contrary-minded? Not seeing or hearing anybody. Thank you. Motion's carried. A bylaw to amend a bylaw respecting the regulation of parking in the city of St. John and amendments thereto. Perfect. Thank you. Good eye, Common Clerk. Thank you. Next item. 12.3, Your Worship, is a staff report with respect to civic commemoration honoring Abraham Beverly Walker. Okay, perfect. Mr. Roulette, you're going to introduce that again.
Thank you. Through Your Worship, to members of council. In the lead up to Black History Month, city staff were approached by a community member who shared the story of Abraham Beverly Walker and the impact he played in St. John and, in fact, Canada's evolution. To celebrate Mr. Walker's and to celebrate this year's Black History Month, staff is recommending to work with community groups in identifying a new commemorative naming opportunity for the late Mr. Walker. While drafting the report, staff chose to integrate some guidance to council on how the city can be best positioned to respond to requests of renaming streets, which stems from a prior council referral. While the proposal for a civics commemoration committee will take a year to fully research, design, and implement, It will be an important step to manage our commemorative efforts on a go-forward basis. With that, I'd like to introduce to you Kate Wilcott, our Arts and Culture Coordinator with the City, who will guide you through our recommendations.
Thanks, Phil, for the introduction, and good evening, Your Worship and Council. So as you will have read in the report, A.B. Walker, or Abraham Beverly Walker, was the first Canadian-born Black lawyer, New Brunswick's first Black lawyer, and his office was just up the hill from City Hall on Princess Street. Walker was admitted as a solicitor to the Supreme Court, and he was also the first Black student to enroll in the St. John Law School. Mr. Walker was an important trailblazing resident of the city, and in honor of February being Black History Month, we're recommending that the city work with the community to recognize him through the naming of a space in his honor. So we'll engage with stakeholders in the community and come back to you with what that could be. So we're not recommending the renaming of an asset, but instead honoring him through the naming of a new city asset. Or this could be an asset belonging to the provincial government or the federal government, or even something within the private sector. We'll be working with the community to look at all the options. This is the 170th anniversary of the birth of Abraham Beverly Walker, and we feel that it's an exciting and a well-deserved project. But there's also a second component to this report, and that is the letter that Phil mentioned that was received by Council in June 2020, written by Mr. Eric Muir, pertaining to the renaming of 2 streets on the city's west side. So we've done a lot of research into the practice of renaming streets, both community-driven, academic, and we also reached out to other municipalities to see what they have in place. And what we're recommending tonight is a policy, and that a policy and a committee is needed for this process. So through this means we can address the renaming of streets using a sympathetic approach and also look at the historical and current contexts. So by 2022, we would have this in place and the city can use this process going forward. So thank you, and I'll turn it back over to Your Worship, and I'm here for any questions.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. First, do I have a mover of the recommendation? Thank you, Deputy Mayor, seconded by Councillor Sullivan. Thank you. So that's on the floor. Any questions or comments? I see Councillor Reardon. Sorry, go ahead.
Thank you, Your Worship. I just want to say that I'm happy to see both of those initiatives coming forward. We've talked about renaming streets in the past. I know it can be a logistical nightmare. St. John is a bit of a nightmare by virtue of the fact that we've been amalgamating. We have the same streets west and in the uptown area. So it does make it difficult. I know 911 can be, you need it for safety to make sure everything is very clear. But I am happy to see this. And when you travel sometimes, you'll see streets in the uptown area. A lot of the streets have a blue street name, a blue plaque for their street name. I think the regular street names are maybe are green. But on top of the street name, there will often be an honorary name. So whatever person that you would like to honor, you could have their name up above that actual street name, and then you could change that over time or whatever. So there are some ways to identify individuals who have been important to your community and honor them without changing the street name. So hopefully we'll look at all that as well. But thank you, Kate, for your presentation. It's very exciting news.
Okay, perfect. Thank you, Councillor Reardon. Councillor Hickey.
Thank you, Your Worship. Certainly echoing Councillor Reardon's perspective, I think it's a great step forward. Excellent tribute to both a pretty impressive community member, but as well Black History Month. Just a quick note, as we look forward to more renamings and efforts like this, I know I think it's very exciting, and it's something I'd be happy to support a framework for those namings. I know places like UNB and a lot of academic institutions have really progressive and well thought out and appropriate plans for those. So I think that'd be a great one to look at as well. Thank you. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Hickey. Deputy Mayor.
Thank you, Your Worship. I just wondered, Kate, if you could check with the Common Clerk's office, because over the years, the last few years, often we've received letters from citizens who have made requests to the city and they haven't been dealt with, but we felt that they should be kept alive, you know, with the letters at the Common Clerk's office. So if you could consider those requests at the same time, you know, once you put a committee in place, that would, I think, would be very good. They may not all be in association with Black History Month, but they will be in association with the history of the city, and they've done something important in the city in the past. So I'd appreciate if they were looked at.
Yes, of course.
Thank you.
Perfect. Thank you, Deputy. Okay, yeah, thanks very much, Kate. I'm very supportive. I've given this a lot of thought, you know, since council, and it's really not a comment about Black History Month. I mean, it just happens to be Black History Month, but you know, since council passed its motion last July around systemic racism and racial discrimination, we were making some headway. We had a change of justice ministers. So I think this is an incredibly, like, these are two pieces of a much broader conversation. And I did attend the unveiling of, as did you, Kate, and others, the Canada Post Willow Grove stamp. And I wrote in that post, recognizing our past is the best way to build a more positive and inclusive future. So certainly I'd like to see this, and I've got some thoughts that I've been working on and that I'll approach council on. You know, I'd like to see this fit into a broader dialogue within the community around equity. I think there are many steps. I do not, who am I to disagree with our former solicitor? I think there are many steps that municipalities can take. I think these are important small steps, and having, you know, policy that allows for a conversation about, you know, things like Ludlow and others. But I think it's a part of a much broader discussion where, you know, we can help grow trust between the municipality and marginalized groups and inclusivity and diversity. And, you know, I think we have to go first on many of these. So very supportive of this tonight is a piece of a much broader discussion that I hope, you know, council will, you know, endorse for this and for future councils to work on. So, all right. Well, that was a really excellent report. Thank you. The recommendations are on the floor. So I'll call the question. All those in favor? Thank you. And anybody contrary-minded? Okay, thank you. That's a really great report tonight. Thanks very much to everyone that worked on that. Thank you, Kate. Okay, thank you. And I believe we have only 2 items left. Next item.
Your worship, item 14.1 is the item that was removed from consent. And that would have been 5.6 in your consent. The title is Sale of LPP Rocking Stone Subdivision.
Okay, I'll turn the chair over to you, Deputy, and I'll just turn my.
Okay. Could we have someone move their recommendation of 5.6? Moved by Councillor Merrithew, seconded by Councillor Sullivan. All those in favor? Contrary minded, motion carried. So, Mayor Darling, you can come back now.
Perfect. Thank you very much, Deputy. Okay, thank you. Next item, Common Clerk.
Yes, 15.1 on your agenda is a letter from R. Wilson with respect to changing the name of Foster Thurston Drive. There's a staff recommendation to refer this to the city manager.
Okay, thank you, Deputy, and seconded by Councillor Reardon. Thank you. City Manager, you had your hand up very quickly and back down again, sir.
No, Your Worship, just for a point of clarification, we stand by the recommendation of refer to City Manager, but now with 12.3 approved, we will roll that into the 12.3 and only address it once we have our renaming committee and policy in place. So it will not be addressed immediately, but it will be addressed in the longer term.
With our new process, yeah. Okay,
yes.
Perfect. Thank you. Okay, thank you. And I'm honoring the referral motion. I did have a couple of comments, but I won't make them. I'll save them. Okay, thank you. And next item, Common Clerk.
The final item is a recommendation that came from Committee of the Whole. It's item 17.1, and it's with respect to appointments to committees, agencies, boards, and commissions.
Okay. Can you just work through, just read those through to us, please, for the record, Common Clerk, and then we'll vote.
Absolutely. First board would be Canada Games Foundation to reappoint David Roberts and Jill Hickson for 3-year terms. City of St. John Shared Risk Pension Plan Board of Trustees, reappoint John DeGruder for 3-year term, and reappoint Ian Poley as an alternate for 3-year term. Heritage Development Board to reappoint Rod Steers for 3-year term, and to appoint Julian Ouimet for 3 years. Planning Advisory Committee to reappoint Alexandra Weaver Crawford and Lord Clancy for 3-year terms, and to appoint Jerry Lowe for a 3-year term. Pro Kids to reappoint Marielle Hannum for a 3-year term, and to appoint Fraser Wells. Aquatic Center Commission to reappoint Stefan Bolduc.
Sorry, Common Clerk, you just paused for a moment. I think.
Oh, did my internet?
Yeah, just back up one. Just back up one appointment. So we get.
What was the last one you heard, Your Worship? You know.
Start after PAC, Common Clerk.
PAC. Okay. Pro Kids is next. Reappoint Marielle Hannum for 3-year term, and Fraser Wells for 3-year term. St. John Aquatic Center Commission to reappoint Stefan Bolduc for 3 years, and St. John Board of Police Commissioners to appoint Councillor Norton until the end of his term on council, and St. John Arts Board to reappoint Abigail Smith for 3-year term, to appoint Kara O, Laura Olin, Mustafa Abdonil for 3-year terms, and St. John Free Public Library to reappoint Alan Davis for 3 years, and to appoint Joanne McGinnis for a 3-year term.
Okay, thank you. Do I have a mover of the recommendation, please? Deputy Mayor, seconded by Councillor Reardon. Thank you. Okay, on the question, call the question. All those in favor? Thank you. And anybody contrary minded? Thank you. Not seeing or hearing anybody. Thank you. The motion is carried. So thank you very much, everybody, for tuning in tonight. It was relatively light, only a couple of 100 pages of reading. Thank you to the many staff that attend these meetings on the standby for us if we have questions for them. And of course, thank you to all the members of council tonight that attended. Can I have a motion to adjourn, please? Thank you. Again, Deputy Mayor, Councillor Sullivan, thank you. And on the question, all those in favor? Thank you. Anyone contrary minded? No one's contrary minded tonight. So thank you very much. Stay safe and take care, everybody. Thank you.